Welcome to GovInsider Live Studios, where we talk to brilliant global government innovators across the world. Joining us today is Mr. Taavi Rõivas, who was Estonia's Prime Minister from 2014 to 2016. When he was Prime Minister, Estonia led the world in digital government. Mr. Rõivas, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Let's start by looking in our crystal balls. When the world starts to recover from this coronavirus, what sort of digitalization can we expect to happen, and how do you think it's going to speed up innovation?
Well, first of all, I hope that this recovery will happen rather faster than later. It's very important that that world comes over it as soon as possible. Now, I'm quite certain that people are much more prone to all sorts of contactless innovation, to enable autonomous driving, to enable all sorts of delivery services, to enable also hopefully digital signing and digital identity. As I'm Estonian, for me, it is a lot easier to work from home because I have my digital ID, I have my digital signature, and everybody in Estonia uses it. So we can sign documents without using any pens, and it actually helps a lot.
And this is something that Estonia has pioneered, having a digital government where even the cabinet could work remotely if needs be. Could you share with us a little bit about how those systems work and how it means that Estonian government can continue as normal?
Well, actually, we have this in place already for 20 years now. And this is very easy to organize in practice. It's just a tool where all the documents are stored and everybody logs in safely with their digital ID, which every Estonian citizen has. So the government doesn't have anything special. They just have that same tool that every Estonian has. But of course, there is a government information system that stores safely all the documents and also keeps record of potential voting or positions of cabinet ministers. I think this is very much needed to use, and it's also important that whenever government passes a bill, it doesn't actually physically travel from the government building to the parliament building. It comes to our parliament building also via electronic channels and is signed digitally by the prime minister and respective ministers.
And it's possible then for Cabinet to have discussions remotely as well? Would people need to go into the Cabinet office, or could they do it over video conference?
Yeah, in principle it is possible. Currently our government is still holding sessions physically. But for example, a few weeks ago, Estonian parliament decided to have all the committee meetings, which is usually between 10 to 15 people, in some cases 20 people, plus civil servants. So it could be altogether as much as 20, 25 people, to hold all the committee meetings via electronic channels. And we are doing it basically just like we are recording this interview right now through video conferencing. And it works like a charm. It's not difficult. And of course, I'm sure that this kind of tools will be used by a lot more people globally. It's visible people having not only work meetings, which was very popular already years ago, but also dinner parties with families and friends just across video bridge.
And government leaders will be trying to prioritise digitisation now and urgently ensure that they can build these sorts of processes. As a leader and someone who has experience of leading these sorts of digitisation projects, what advice do you have for them?
Well, I think the mentality of people is changing as we speak, and hopefully people are less afraid of this kind of digital tools in the future. I think if the system is designed safely and keeping privacy in mind, there should be much more openness to having digital government tools. And today we are facing the situation where we don't have an option. We actually need to get services from our governments electronically. Just as we prefer having food deliveries instead of going to shops, we need to get government services up and running digitally as well. And it doesn't make sense at current times to go to any government offices physically, because in Estonia and in many other countries there is a rule that you should stay at home and flatten the curve.
And many government officials will be keen to introduce this digitisation, but they may be very well worried about cybersecurity, which I know for you in Estonia has often been a concern and a priority for the government. How can they be reassured about the security of these remote working arrangements, and what would you advise they do?
Well, I advise taking cybersecurity very seriously, and when designing all the information registers, thinking about not only the security of the channel, which in our case is digital identity, and it's a very safe way of getting into those government information systems, logging in and signing documents, but also thinking about more or less physical security, meaning that if some government system is either under attack or having some sort of let's say physical reasons why it can't work, to get it up and running from different location in real time. That's why Estonia came up with strategy of data embassies a few years ago, which means that if the physical server or servers in Estonia have trouble running for whatever DDoS attack or power shortage, which is very unlikely to happen, but never say never in today's world, then we can get it up and running from Luxembourg, for example, or any other location.
And a note to our viewers who are watching on Facebook Live, we are responding to questions in the comments section now, so please do keep your questions coming in as well. A question about remote working and the way that we're working currently. Do you think there are any processes that we would never need to go back to the old ways of doing? Do you think there are things that we could just keep doing as we're doing now?
Well, looking from a politician's perspective, I hope there will be less, 2-hour meetings in Brussels where everybody flies together and then flies back home. I think these kind of meetings, it's actually much more convenient to organize from home or your office. So I think this kind of needless travel will be reduced probably. And also I think looking from my own experience, it's actually pretty cool to visit your grandfather every single day, because my grandfather is using video conferencing just as we are, and it's actually quite convenient way to stay in touch with your parents or grandparents. In today's busy world, it's very difficult to meet them physically, even without this virus outbreak.
I know that as we move to this new way of working, there are questions being raised, concerns being raised around privacy, particularly with the ways that governments are trying to fight this novel coronavirus. How can governments learn from Estonia and build privacy into that system and ensure that there is the trust in the data that's held on citizens and the way that it's being used?
Well, for example, if we take the case of health records, in Estonia, everybody's health records are digitized, so doctors can get very easily access to my health record or anyone's health record. But one very important but behind that is that if you log in, there will be also traces that this doctor has logged in, and I myself as a patient or just a citizen can at any time look who has looked at my health data. So basically there is this kind of safety measure that nobody can intrude your privacy without your consent, and if somebody has violated that privacy, and some of your health record, for example, has been made public for some reason or leaked in any other way, you can yourself check who has looked at your health data, and you can press charges if needed.
So consent can be an important principle even as we are using data to fight the coronavirus and even as we move to more remote ways of working.
Well, I think we should be more open to using big data, which is anonymized to a great extent, and make sense of that data to fight the crisis, fight the virus. This I wouldn't have as a citizen any objection in using. I would be though careful in using personalized data, and I wouldn't outrule it completely, but this has to be agreed in the society that this type of data needs to be used, and I think even during the crisis we cannot completely forget about our liberties and our privacy issues as well.
Let's talk about borders now, because when you were Prime Minister, you promoted cross-border schemes from healthcare to the pioneering e-residency scheme where anyone across the world could become an e-resident of Estonia. What we're seeing now is that borders are going up across the world. Is there still a place in the future for these cross-border schemes? And in fact, how could they help in tackling the current crisis we have now?
Well, I actually think that in the future there is much more demand for this kind of cross-border digital services, because even though the physical borders are temporarily back up or again distributing the world to smaller pieces, the digital borders are not there, and the demand for cross-border digital services is higher than ever. So hopefully we will see more people using both digital identity in the world, but also all sorts of digital government services that could easily become cross-border services.
And I'm sure when you were a Prime Minister, you had your fair share of communicating during crises and problems. What advice would you have to people both in the public sector but also in the private sector who are trying to communicate to their own organisations now throughout this crisis?
Well, this is a very difficult question, because honestly speaking, we don't know yet for sure how long this crisis will be, what will the effects be, and we don't have a global strategy yet in place how to overcome this crisis. So, of course, this is frightening for people, this is frightening for organizations, but I would advise, even when physical distancing is very much needed, I would advise to stay away from distancing each other completely in the question of cooperation. We should cooperate, and all the past crises, which have all been very difficult and very different, they have been solved better if organizations, countries, and so forth cooperate. So I'm quite sure that the initial shock has to be put aside, and now we need to boost up the cooperation between countries and within international organizations as well.
And in your politics, you've always been in support of the international community and international institutions. How are they doing so far in the crisis, and what could they be doing to help countries and citizens tackle this issue?
Well, I think many thought that this crisis happened so fast that countries and organizations, let's say, took time to react properly. But I see a lot of things developing right now. I see EU working closely together. I hope that we will see less protectionism, less every country by themselves. I see positive signs already, but of course there is a lot more room to cooperate. And coming from small country in the northern corner of Europe, I think it would make sense to cooperate with other countries with similar size in our neighborhood to for example, procure supplies of defensive gear for doctor, or procure additional these ventilators that are needed for our hospitals. So I think there should be much more cooperation, and I hope that we are witnessing this soon.
And the European Union in particular has been quite tested over the past few years, both with Brexit and then, of course, this week Hungary has suspended civil liberties so that it can tackle the coronavirus, it claims. How can Europeans come together and stress the common values that they have, and which institutions do you think in Europe would be the ones that would be leading more internationalism?
Well, I think it's definitely up for the Council to coordinate several steps that countries are taking. Health is not actually the competence of the European Union. It hasn't been given to European level to solve health crises or to deal with health as such. But having said that, I think that there is a lot of room to coordinate, for example, movement of goods. I understand completely that movement of people, which is one very essential European freedom of movement, is now limited, and that has been the decision of several countries. But the movement of goods needs to stay in place, and of course the European governments need to coordinate that this actually happens, because there is a lot of supplies, not only medical, but a lot of supplies that we are interdependent on.
And let's finish up with reasons to be cheerful. You're an innovator yourself, you're involved in a vast number of different projects. So what sort of innovations at the moment are exciting you?
Well, definitely autonomous driving. Estonia has a very, very interesting company that is producing autonomous vehicles, and I'm looking very, very closely how they are doing, and I think that there will be a lot of progress in this field. Also, probably delivery robots that will get goods to your doorstep without physical human contact. I'm quite sure that the people are much prone to, or much more open to, let's say, this kind of innovations now, when we actually understand that even the delivery guy might need to stay at home at some point, and if we can help to deliver goods with autonomous driving, I think that would be very, very interesting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roivas, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. Thank you also for answering questions in the comments section on Facebook Live, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much for joining us today, and to help you get through the lockdown, we've got some other interviews coming up every Tuesday for the next month. Joining us on the 14th is Sandiaga Uno. He ran for Vice President of Indonesia. He's an entrepreneur, and he's going to talk about universal basic income. Joining us on the 21st, we have the Under Secretary General of the United Nations. She is going to talk about a woman's experience coming from a developing nation and rising to the very top of global governance. And on the 28th, we've got Arvind Gupta, who was Prime Minister Modi's social media chief for 2 landslide election victories. And he's going to talk to us about how we communicate and how we use social media in these times of remote working. We'll see you again soon, and please subscribe to our page and follow us for more updates.